Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate everybody being here on this beautiful day. And thank you for Jess and Megan for doing everything. These guys have just been amazing. Everyone has been so nice to me in helping me organize the show, and it's been so easy. I mean, we've all had difficult shows, and I guess, but this has been such a easy way to hang a show and exhibit and stuff. I think the work represents a pretty good selection of sort of what I've been doing in the studio for a long time, which for me is very much based in where I grew up in Flickering, Massachusetts. I grew up in a barn very much like this on a horse farm. That's why I spent a lot of time in attics and haylofts working on paintings. And de Kooning has always been, to me, one of my most important artists. He's really deep down in, and so I think as Gothic and as New England oriented as this work is, it has very much, the process I've learned from de Kooning and how he makes paintings and how I make paintings, I've learned a great deal from that, My schooling was, I went to the Swain School of Design, which is a very figurative painting school back in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and I went to Parsons for grad school. And I studied with like Leland Bell, Paul Ressica, David Loeffler-Smith, and De Niro, and a few others. And it was, so it's, the pictures represent, I think, a pretty good distillation of what I think about process and what I think about narrative. Because for me, the process of making a painting is all well and good, but it's the image I want, I'll do anything to get the image, to get that image that I want in the picture. And the process of making them is secondary to that. People always think of it like, I cut out paper shapes and glue them on there, and that's the process. But I'm only interested in the image. I'll add as much paper, paint, or whatever I need to get that picture exactly perfect. And I think that this one maybe starts something of what I was working with. Having grown up in New England, there's a little farmhouse in New England where Deborah Sampson was born. You really know what Deborah Sampson is? She was the only woman to fight in the American Revolution. She dressed up as a man and she fought in the American Revolution. It wasn't until she was discovered with the flu that she was discovered to be a woman, and her husband was the first person to get a widow's pension, And she was born in my hometown. We have this little plaque there. And so, because there were also 2 women who are buried in my home cemetery who were accused of witchcraft, that's always been very part of my personal narrative coming from Plimpton. And this picture represents that for me, this small town in Plimpton and this image of New England witchcraft, yet power of the people coming, and I think that's part of how I develop pictures. I paint on paper, and then I cut out shapes and glue them on there, just because I like to change the picture very quickly. If it's not going well, I'll add more paper, add more paint, and just keep moving that process forward until the picture begins to come together. Like this one too, it become very, I work on them over and over again until they become cohesive imagery to me. And I think that part of the reason I feel like de Kooning is in my process is because he worked that same way. I think that when you look at de Kooning paintings, you see that process of building a picture and then it collapses. You build a picture and then it collapses. You build a picture and then it collapses. And then that's that's where I find the best way to make a picture. I had this figure here, and then I moved in, and then I moved out, and then I moved in, and then I moved out. And that vibration of line and form and color that sort of builds that form. You look at a Matisse drawing, and you see that ghost imagery. You know, you see that ghost of the drawing, and he wipes it out and pulls it back, and wipes it out and pulls it back. I love that. I can't get enough of that vibrating form that Matisse builds. And I find that in de Kooning too. Like, you build it, you gotta crush it, and you build it, you crush it, you build it. And then eventually it just sort of snaps in, and then you know you have it, you know? And that's what I'm looking for all the time in my pictures. That moment when, sometimes it takes months, sometimes it'll take a year or two, but when I think of paintings as house of cards, you know, a painting of smoke. You build it up, and it so easily collapses, you know, and it's like, I didn't get it. And then you sort of build it and build it, build it and build it. But I think to make a good picture, you have to kind of hate your own work. I think if you fall in love with it, or you fall in love with your own imagery, or you fall in love with your own style, you're dead. You have to be able to hate it and love it, you know, and need it. And then and then it kind of builds out from that place. And when you get to a point where you can't make it any better, then I stop, you know. So for me, it's very difficult to find when I want to stop on a painting. And I work on them for years sometimes, you know, and like this picture, for instance, I think about, I have this hourglass, and here's a stiletto shoe. And the stiletto is slowly dissolving because the bones of life, life is almost over, right? And when things are dissolving, time is changing, sexuality you have when you're younger, it all dissolves, and what you have left is your bones and your time, you know? And I think about that a long time, like that's how I build a picture, you know, over time, over layers, and you folding it together. I think this one also illustrates that, like, sexuality, the boot, right? It's, you know, it slowly folds over, and then death comes on, but painting still survives, you know? Same thing with this one. The stiletto with the hourglass heel, slowly time changes, things change, and death is always right there. This one is a sort of a distillation of growing up in Massachusetts. On all the gravestones out there, they have these wonderful funeral urns with these weeping willows on them, that's sort of like dressed out. And it's sort of like my homage to growing up in Massachusetts, you know, with the small farmhouses and stuff. And this, you know, image of the presentation of death and the beauty of it too, you know, the grandeur of it. This one over here is my love of the unicorn tapestries at the cloisters. And you know, the poor unicorn, you always see the poor unicorn, he's always gonna die, right? You always see him trapped in this little cage and you're gonna kill him. But this one, he escapes. He gets away, you know? He jumps free. But, yes. And this one is about being in the studio. And even though death is close and is coming, the cat can still escape. You know, the cat is still here. It's the life of the studio, right? You might be painting the skull, but there's a little bit of a rainbow coming through the stained glass window, and the cat can still get away. You know? So that's a memory for me to keep going, you know, in spite of all the fear and the uncertainty of every day, you know. And so that helps me get through. This one is just about, you know, like when you go to the Met and you see, like, you go to the Met and you see like the side of a chair and you remember when you go home or you see part of a painting, you think, oh my God, I love that part of that painting. That's what I was thinking about this one. Small bit of a Renaissance painting you saw, and maybe there was a bottle of wine there, and then the palettes are pushing forward, you know. And so this is what that was about, just little bits of memory of going to museums and seeing things. And this one here is about, again, this longing of desperation. You know, you're feeling desperate, and yet somehow you can still rise up and become a phoenix, you know, regardless of the circumstances you may be in. It's interesting to see them all together like this. They all seem very so deeply personal, you know, like there's a, I want them so bad all the time. Like whenever I'm not in the studio, I feel like I'm not in my vampiric dirt, you know, where my true powers lie. You know, that's where I'm like, oh, I'm in my strongest powers. And when I'm not there, I always feel a little weaker, you know, because I need that. I need the need, you know, to get there. And I don't know that I'm explaining these paintings very well, but there's a quality of constant craving that I can't ever satisfy. I just like gotta get there all the time. And I know when I get there with a painting, like, you know, like you get to a point where like, okay, I can't make it any better, just please put it aside and do another one. But that's where I always need to be, you know, that thing, and I'll do anything to get there, you know. No kids, no money, no whatever, you know, whatever, you know, like just because I have to have that moment, you know, like, so whatever I have to do to get there, I'll do it. And it's, you know, I just want that studio release, like this one. If I remember this painting over and over again, here it is. See, this is my palette, you know, my canvas. And here's the cat. There's the predator in the studio, and the bird that's going to set it free. You know, so it's both cat and bird, palette and death. You know, and like this one here, I've worked on a long time. It's, you know, his death, and he's weighing sexuality and painting. You know, who's going to win? They're both going to lose because it's death. You know, and the rest stands on top of the world. And he's taken me a long time to find him, but I've really learned to love him. And you know, they become very tactile. I don't mean to make them really three-dimensional. I just work on them over and over again until they feel right. Like if I could do it in one try, I would just do it in one shot. But there's a massaging quality that happens over time, you know. And also, I think it's you know, times like when you're in the studio and you're like, what am I going to do? You sort of pick up a brush and stop working on it anyway, because like you're distracted, you want to go home, you're tired, you're freaking out. You know, we just do something, and so then, you know, you sort of start building forms and space, and then you sort of get into that sort of personal dialogue of how the picture puts together. But you know, this one too, like I just wanted to paint some flowers, and then I thought, well, what if I just put a bird up here, and then sort of expressing out, you know. Sort of like related to this one, but obviously it's a little darker, you know. But yeah, it's funny. It's a unknowable need, you know. It's an unknowable need, I think. And maybe painting comes first, sexuality comes second, and yet the boot stands on top of the palette, you know, because they're both so interrelated. But as the floppy boot, that's the side, it slowly fades, and the painting will survive, you know, the painting will continue. This one also too, the stiletto dissolving into the bones, and here's death explaining to me, oh, see, it's all over, you know, sorry, you know, time is ticking little by little, you know, and it flies away. And so, yeah. This one, I thought, you know, you look at those great paintings by Balthus, and all his furniture looks like it's walking across the room, you know? It's all got legs, and it's all kind of sort of like, you know, it looks like giant, you think about like Kafka, you know, his giant metamorphosis, you know, like the giant bug waking up one morning. I think about that with the painting on the palette, like what if it got up and it left the room? So that's, this one here is sort of like this little palette sort of skittling across and getting a little, you know, painting on the easel sort of getting away. But there's also like the idea of like the studio as being not a kind of a fetish object in itself, like the idea of having a studio, you know, and producing things, you know, in that world, in that space. You have your light, you got your table, you got your easel, you got your paints, and you're gonna make something, you know. And so that's, I think, what history of West painting, right? Flower on a table, right? But no, the painting's gonna get away from you. And this one is just a sweet little picture. It has a nice little nail polish on it too, because when David Bowie died, I was painting my nails for a while, and I put a little on there just for remember David. But yeah, you know, it's difficult to explain them. All I can only say is that I really, you know, you know, I need them all the time, you know, and when I'm not in there, I want to be in there, you know. And even though they might be failures, and there's, God knows there's a lot of those, I feel like I have a reason, you know, to make them. And this one, right there in the main, you know, if you go to the Met, you see those great ivory skulls, and the heads never really work that well together. They're all kind of crushed together, but see, there she is, and there he is. These are the ones that just landscape paintings I did that didn't go very well, so I sprayed a little paint on them to make them a little more gothic. It helps. I do a lot of landscape painting too. I paint a lot of plein air paintings and do a lot of drawings in the model, because it helps keep my eye fresh, my thinking clear. You know, you paint the model, you paint outside, or whatever. Like, it kind of keeps you focused on reality, real color and stuff. So when you go into your studio, you're not just like, you have some basis of like how actual imagery works and how to make a good graphic image. So even though these I thought needed a little spray paint, which I think kind of helped them a lot because it kind of relates to the spray paint that's working on those. They're good. I do a lot of these, and then you know, because I try to build a world where I want to be in. You know, this little bird here going away. You know, like the birds in those and the birds in those. And this one here, Central Park, with the Dakota in the background. Reminds me of, do you remember Rosemary's Baby when I called it the Dakota and I called it the Bramford? I love that, the Bramford. So this is the Bramford painting. Same thing with the Bow Bridge in Central Park. So I was talking earlier about this to Meghan about how, like, I feel like in the current climate we're living in, we're so close to conspiracy and witchcraft, and it's like we think on a rational level, but 2 steps below that, we're all very tribal, you know, and we're very, you know, we very easily slip in. We're already slipping into so many dark things, and I think that there's always right below the surface that sense of conspiracy, witchcraft, superstition is all right below, 2 steps down, and I think about that a lot, and I think that I feel that that's where I need to be as an artist, to keep exploring that, you know, because growing up in New England, that's what we talked about all the time as kids, you know, witchcraft and deviltry and stuff like that. And so even though I feel like I work in a way that relates to abstract expressionism and how de Kooning reaches together and like form and push and pull like the Kaufman talked about, it's always imbued with that sense of Gothic narrative. You know, I can't ever get away with it. And I've had art dealers say, oh, no, you should stop doing this and do these abstract paintings, and why don't you paint just, you know, whatever. No. I have a Gothic attitude. I have a Gothic perspective, and I'm going to continue with that regardless of anything. Because, you know, no one's paying for the studio but me. So, like, I'm going to do what I want to do in there. And that's where I feel like I create my strength as an artist. You know? This one too, I just want to do some more of these. I just want to do some more of like these sort of hard images of paintings with other things around them, just pictures of memories and things that take you through the day, right? When you're really freaking out one day, you can barely hold on, and you go, no, I remember that chair leg at that museum, and that was really cool, and I could get through the day if I hold on to that imagery. And so that's some of what I'm thinking about here. So here she is, and this is her book of spells that she's holding on to, you know? And so that gives me some sense of stability and something to hold on to, you know? Because, you know, maybe like a lot of us, you know, I'm always feeling really unsure of things, and, you know, but to be able to hold on to the imagery and the pictures and continue producing it gives me something to step forward to. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The double rainbow. I'm just gonna do it better next time, but I want a double rainbow, and then death and a maiden, holding on. It's just a reminder that every moment you have is so quickly gone. You hold on to it. It's my love. It's my love, my girl. She's producing the zodiac. She's got this ball of smoke, and all of the zodiac creatures coming out of it. But she's dangerous because she'll touch you with her claws. This kind of picture is like, it's been through quite a few iterations, but, I just like, if it doesn't quite feel well, I'll just add a little more paper, a little more paint, a little more paper, a little paint, and just sort of massage the thing back and forth until it comes together, until I feel like it's finished. And, yeah. Each one is, I don't pre-plan them necessarily. I just sort of like, I have a general idea of what I want to do, and then I just go after that. I think that the schooling that I've got helps me have a framework to continue to make pictures, regardless of how badly they're going, I know that I can go back into the studio, and even though I might be on the floor, freaking out, wondering what the hell I'm doing with my life, I know that if I peek at a corner of a painting, I'll be like, oh, well, if I just change that, and then you're back into the painting. So it helps me keep me going, even the bad ones do, Because de Kooning had my favorite art quote of any artist. He said, "My imitators can paint a bad de Kooning, but only I can paint a bad one." What a great thing to say, like I can make a mess of myself, but no one else can, That's, I think, is the strength of being an artist, it's like not caring. That's the key, I think. You have to care, but not care. I think if you really want to paint, you have to hate it and love it at the same time. If you love your work, you do it. If you hate your work, you do it. You have to care and not care at the same time. It's the same feeling. Care only about it and hate it at the same time. That's, I think, when you're painting. That's my opinion. That's how it works for me, Hate, love, hate. People always say hate's wrong. Hate can be a good thing. Anger, rage, you gotta have that core, I think, inside you a little bit of anger, personal rage about something. And then I think you can really hate the work and love it at the same time. Then you punch it, you get it in there, and you get some power out of the work, Like, I think this one has a certain amount of power, Just rising up, Phoenix, pushing through, like, boom, boom, boom. It's a certain push up. I remember when I was back in the East Village, I'll never forget, I went to 13th and B, and somebody had painted a black bird on the side of a chimney. And it was the most spectacular black bird I've ever seen. It was just a simple black brush paint over it, this big, on the side of a chimney. And it was the most amazing bird. Every time I looked at it, like, just pushed up against that chimney every time. Day, night, dark, light, didn't matter. That thing had power. And I've always tried to reproduce that, because it was just the right graphic image, I want that release. So that's what I try to give these pictures, a certain amount of